Welcome back to Expat Curious. And with this episode, I'm just going to kind of get to the point. Is now, like right now, is now the time to leave the United States if you're an American. Now, what now means is at the time of this filming, about 2.5 months into the second Trump administration. Just about anything I can say about the current situation is going to age like milk. Anybody who predicts where things are going to go from here on in is a fool. In terms of my ability to see into the future, there have been certain things I've been 100% right about. And then there are other things that I've been completely wrong about. And the things I've tended to be right about are the trends based on facts I can see. And the things I've tended to be wrong about are the way people will react to them and what will come of these changes. And the human factor is always difficult to predict, but I'm willing to predict a couple of things with some certainty. Wherever things go from here on in, many of the outcomes will be unexpected, because anytime you have this much chaos thrown into an existing system, it's like scattering an anthill, and there's no way to know where all the ants are going to wind up. There's going to be a lot of competing interests, not just domestically in the U.S., but globally. There's going to be actions and reactions. A lot of things that have not happened at the time of this filming are certain to happen. In the medium term, I do not see too many good outcomes. I'll put my cards on the table and say that though I don't strictly fall into the American definition of liberal or conservative, I do not think the things that Donald Trump and his administration are bringing to the United States are positive. And in fact, I didn't think so the first time, and it was a factor in me leaving. So those of you who think that you might be overreacting to the current situation, I do not think that you are. But I'm willing to predict chaos, and I'm willing to predict that things are not going to work out the way anybody expects. And above and beyond that, this could go any number of ways. So to answer the question of, is this time for you to go? That's going to be a factor of your individual appetite for risk and what your risks are leaving versus staying. And something I want to say is that part of the reason the United States is in the situation it is in is we have grown up, most of us, in a fairly stable domestic world. I mean, things that happen, bad things tended to happen outside of the US, and we felt kind of untouchable. And that bred a certain sense of complacency and a certain disinterest in how things actually worked. And that is now biting the American public in the ass. And it doesn't really matter if you're left or right, because it manifests different ways for different people. This sense of complacency and entitlement was a cultural thing. It's something that I can recall complaining about as far back as 30 years ago, the fact that people just were disinterested in how things worked. They were disinterested in the nuts and bolts of politics. People had opinions, but they weren't very informed opinions. And the idea that John Kennedy espoused, that's not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country, that's long gone. It was just a sense of, everything's going to work out for us. We're American. We don't got to think about it anymore, except complain that I didn't get this or I didn't get that. That's not the way any other country in the world works. And the way we're viewed internationally, people talk about how Americans overseas are looked at as being rude, or, that's not how we're seen. Actually, Americans are seen overseas as kind of being overly friendly. The main issue that people have with us overseas is that we're ignorant and entitled. And speaking as an American, I don't think this is an unfair stereotype. I don't think, I think most Americans are well-meaning. They think they're doing the right thing, but we don't. We're incurious. We're an anti-intellectual society, and we, by virtue of being protected by oceans and many, many years of having a muscular defense projected outward, we didn't really have to think about anything but ourselves. A lot of the moves that are being made by the Trump administration are with the idea that this sort of us first policy can continue without any sort of quid pro quo or exchange of value with other countries. It's just like, we're Americans, we're going to do what we want, and we don't have to care about what you want. That's not going to work. I don't really care which politics are, and I try to respect everybody on this channel, but the idea that America just can go on and call its own shots and not really care about the needs or even being a good faith dealer with other countries. The idea that we can project that way and have all of the privileges of being the world superpower moving forward, that's not going to happen. There will be reactions, and that's going to play into your decision about whether you want to stay in the U.S. or not. And this gets me back to the other thing I wanted to say, is that we Americans have gotten used to the idea that we are not at risk. You know, that our individual lives can kind of continue going on unfettered by outside concerns, and a lot of the freak out that's happening in the U.S. right now, and also a lot of the complacency, is rooted in the idea that, well, you know, nothing bad ever really happens to us. And again, don't care what your politics are. That's false. You know, I'm standing right now in a place called Phnom Penh in Cambodia, and just about 50 years ago, almost to the day, tanks rolled into the city, spearheaded by a former ruler and a rural population that was really mad at all the elites and all the smart people, and they took over and basically enslaved all of the people that they considered to be elites, which is, you know, basically anybody with an education, anybody with any creativity, anybody with any knowledge. Now, of course, there were a lot of differences between what happened here in Cambodia and what's happening in the U.S., but that idea of the urban versus rural divide, the anti-intellectualism, the anti-elitism, the anti-knowledge, and the idea of wanting to just tear down the country and rebuild, that is common to what's going on in the U.S. right now. And I'm not saying we're going to have a repeat of the Cambodian genocide in the U.S., but it didn't work out well. And, you know, a third of the country perished for one reason or another because of this very simplistic and wrong-headed policy that was forced on the country. And my point being, I don't think anybody here thought that was going to be the outcome when the Khmer Rouge rolled into the city 50 years ago. You know, I mean, some of them might have thought things were going to be pretty bad, but I don't think they thought they were going to get, you know, up to the level of the Armenian genocide or something similar to what happened in Germany in World War II. You know, that I don't think that was in anybody's mind. Bad things can happen to you. I hate to say this, because as Americans we've gotten used to the idea that they won't. But they can and they may. So what you have to decide is what's your relative level of risk, because there are risks to leaving the country, especially if you are not ready, especially if you haven't done your research about the place you're going. And you also have to decide your moral stance. There is going to be a fight in the States of some form. I'm not saying it will be a physical fight. It may be an ideological fight, but there is going to be, if you have like nearly half, or some would say more than half of the country that is vehemently opposed to the direction that the country is taking and feel like their voice has been completely erased from the conversation, those folks are, you know, the level of the resistance is yet to be seen, but there will be one. And you have to decide if that's something that you want to be part of or not. Now, obviously, I've been over here for nearly 8 years, and I did not leave because of Trump being elected, but it was the deciding factor, because I had sensed a lot of other issues in our culture that were bothering me, and the election of Trump solidified the idea in my head that this wasn't just a fantasy. I wasn't just being paranoid, that there was something really wrong here in the way that we related to our government and we related to each other. That this was what a lot of us thought would be a viable path. That's a sign of deep, deep problems in our culture. So I made the decision to get out of the way as quickly as I could and get as far away from as I could, and my life has been substantially the better for it. But I got out way ahead of the curve, right? We're in a different situation now. If I were still in the States, I might make a different set of calculations now. But I've already sort of made my set of decisions, and I have to change the world in ways that I think are feasible for me. And one of them is trying to do content on YouTube that isn't dumbed down and is thoughtful and isn't just clickbaity crap, you know, and holding up the banner for knowledge and being informed and being measured and being rational and being thoughtful, which is part of what's not in the discourse now. That's part of the way that I try to fight. But how much that's worth anything in this day and age, we can debate that, you know. For you have to decide what's best for you and what is best for your conscience. Having said all this, the people that got out of Cambodia 50 years ago before this all went down, things worked out a lot better for them than the people that stayed. That's just a fact. If you're in a country that is going towards totalitarianism, and I don't think there's anybody who looks at things fairly and rationally and sees the moves that have been made by the current administration and compares them with what's been done in the past, I don't think it's really arguable that this is what's going on. You might be happy about it, or you might think it's horrible, but this is what's going down. If you're in a place where you no longer can count on the rule of law to adjudicate fairly or respect the rights and the opinions of the out people, whether that's people that we think of as minorities or just people that are opposing the government or opposing the people that are in power, you're going to have a lot more ability to express those ideas and not be ruled by that if you're simply not in the jurisdiction that's being totalitarian. It's that simple. So I think you got a choice. You stay and fight or go if you don't like what's going on. And that sounds judgy, but I'm not being judgy. You know, I mean, there's one of my old videos said, "Go where you want it." There's mass firings in the U.S. right now, and there's a defunding of universities. There's a wholesale attack on, you know, kind of as I said, happened here, on anything intellectual, anything elitist, anything knowledge-based. Well, there's a whole lot of people in the world that want the knowledge base that America has created. And if America doesn't want it anymore, there's going to be people that do. And if you are a creator, if you are a scientist, if you are a person with skills that are valuable and they're no longer being valued, I would say, hell yeah, go. Go where people value your skills and will put them to good use. If you're not in that situation and you feel strongly about what's going on, you have to decide. You got to decide how you're going to roll. I don't want to say anything more than that. And, you know, I mean, not everybody that watches this show, I mean, I watches my channel is of the same politics. And if you're in sympathy with the things that are going on, okay. But this still applies to you. You know, you're going to be affected by what's around you. And there may be some things that are coming down the pike that you don't want to associate yourself with. So keep that in mind. So in terms of the practical parts of this, timing is everything. And, you know, I don't know when you're watching this. I'm fairly sure that by the time a lot of you watch this, some of the things I'm saying may seem quaint because things will have moved on to another place. So I'm going to try to keep this to things that are somewhat timeless in terms of advice. The obvious things, get your finances liquid, get your passport updated as soon as possible. I just got mine renewed early because it's a fairly predictable thing that with all the government cuts at a certain point it'll get to the State Department and it will get harder to get passports processed. But America's standing around the world is going to be substantially weakened, and this is going to create issues for all of us that are overseas. Here in Cambodia, they just got put on a potential no travel list. There's always the potential of retaliation, that they may say, well, fine, we don't want the Americans here anymore either. I don't think that's likely, but it's possible. So as you're thinking about where you want to go, you need to try to put yourself out of the reach of those geopolitical concerns as much as it's possible to do, and I think it's wise to have a couple of backup plans because, like I said, the one thing I'm willing to predict is things are going to go unexpected ways. I can think of 5 or 6 things that would have seemed like conspiracy theories years ago that I think are plausible outcomes at the moment, and any one of them could radically reshape the world in a very short period of time. So you need to think about, if you go, where are you going to go, what's the likelihood you're going to be able to stay there, and what's the likelihood that your ability to stay there is going to be compromised by things that are going to happen. But your best hedge against that stuff happening is simply this. I talked about going where you want it. Whatever you decide to do, if you decide to stay in the States or if you decide to leave, contribute. Do something that's of value to the way you want the world to be. Now, I myself, one of my great sad life lessons is people are not the way I wish they were. And I think a lot of people are having that same realization now. But I'm also a person. Yeah, and the failings of humanity are my failings also. And the reason evil takes root is not because we are bad people. It's because we believe we are good people, and we stop asking ourselves the hard questions about what our place in the world is. Yeah, and some call this woke. I don't think of it that way because there's issues with wokeness as well, because you also cannot make any kind of move in this world, unfortunately, without either intentionally or usually inadvertently hurting someone else, even if it's only by invalidating their choices. I talked about this in one of the prior videos. You can't change the world. The world is a constant battle between opposing forces and opposing urges. Okay, you yourself cannot make the world the way you want it to be. You cannot make people the way you want it to be. But you can represent the way you want it to be in your own life. You don't have to do it in big ways. It can be in small ways. It can just be in the integrity with which you live your life and the way you walk the walk that you wish everybody else walked. Okay? So your best defense, if you decide to embark on this adventure and go live outside the US, is your ability to contribute to your adopted home, the respect with which you treat the people around you, and the way you live the values that you wish other people lived. As Americans, I hate to say it, but we are going to be less respected and less trusted moving forward for a long time to come outside of our home country. I think this is guaranteed. So for every one of us that choose to live outside the country, we are doubly responsible to represent ourselves individually and our values in a way that demonstrates our respect and understanding and desire to help the people around us in our adopted culture. If you don't do this, I think the moral part of this it becomes a lot more questionable. Because remember, like for me, you know, I'm coming from a relatively rich country and I'm living in a poorer one. I have certain privileges just by virtue of my economic status relative to the people that live here, even though my economic status is not that great, but it's better than theirs. And that is, as always, a potential for abuse. Unintentional though it may be. So you need to be aware of this, particularly because this same mindset is part of the problem that is engulfing our country and other places in the world. This idea that if you got enough money and you can isolate yourself from the consequences, you can do whatever the hell you want. Don't live that way. Or if you do want to live that way, you are not going to be in control of the consequences in another culture like you might be in your home culture. Okay? So, I had a lot of other things I was going to say. I got a big long list here, but I think that covers it. You know, this is an individual decision, but this really is about how ready are you. If you're not ready, get ready. Your timing may be crucial. You may not get to choose the moment when you are best able to go. Keep an eye on things. Do not reject media messaging out of hand, but be aware that everybody's being manipulated to some degree. So focus on what the media is factually telling you, not how they interpret it for you, and how it will affect you personally. And use that as a way to make your own decisions. And just decide which way you're going to go. And if you are going to wait and see, be ready. Be ready, be nimble, be able to make a move quickly. That's my suggestion. Is it time to leave? If you're thinking about it, if you think this is what you want to do, I would fast track that plan. But if you're not sure, take a good long look at the risks of leaving and the risks of staying, and let your conscience be your guide. On a personal note, I want to talk a little bit quickly about the channel and about this show. As the production quality of the videos on this channel has gotten higher and my workload here as a musician has gotten higher also, it's been hard for me to get videos up in a timely way, and that's been reflected, of course, in the patronage and the income of the channel going down, which I am not upset about. I totally understand it. But to keep the channel going, I'm going to have to turn that around somehow. And I'm thinking more about, rather than doing shows like this, doing something that's a bit more interactive and maybe stuff where I can just respond in real time to what people want to know from me. And I haven't really thought through what that means yet, but something where, you know, I can go out like this, just film something real quick, put it up, don't care, you know, I'm not looking magnificent at the moment, but just get it up in real time and get something that's a little more regular and people can get more real-time value from. It doesn't mean I'm gonna stop doing the other shows and everything like that, but it's clear that I've gotta change things up here. So I am open to your suggestions in the comments. That's about it. Good luck, everybody.